He opened the door without looking, as if he'd known who it was. And maybe he had. The rain hadn't let up all night. It drummed against the roof and windows like fingers on a table, impatient, waiting for something to happen. Elias stood in the doorway, his hand still resting on the brass knob. His face didn't change when he saw her. No surprise, no relief. Just a slow exhale, like he'd been holding his breath for years. Mara stood beneath the dim glow of the hallway light, soaked from the storm outside. Her dark hair clung to her face and her coat sagged with the weight of the rain. She looked tired, older, but not broken. Not yet. You're still here, she said quietly. Elias swallowed hard. You left. She didn't deny it. Didn't look away either. I had to. He stepped aside without another word, letting her in. She moved past him, her boots leaving faint wet marks on the wooden floor. The apartment was exactly as she'd left it, untouched, frozen in time. Same worn-out couch, same stacks of books, same half-finished coffee mug on the kitchen counter. Everything remained as if waiting for this moment. Elias closed the door behind her, but didn't follow immediately. He leaned against it, closing his eyes for a brief second. When he opened them again, Mara was already seated at the small dining table, setting her satchel down beside her. You knew I was coming, she said, not as a question, but as a statement. He walked toward her, his steps slow, deliberate. I always know when you're near. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. How? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he poured 2 cups of coffee, black, no sugar, and sat across from her. The steam curled between them like a veil. Because you're part of me, he finally said. Mara's lips parted slightly, but she didn't speak. She reached for the cup, her fingers brushing against his as she took it. The touch sent a jolt through him, familiar, electric, like a current running beneath skin. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then softly she asked, Did you ever stop looking for me? Elias exhaled slowly. No. A silence stretched between them, heavy with all the things they hadn't said over the years. Finally, Mara placed her cup down and looked directly at him. They're coming for you, Elias. His expression didn't change, though something shifted inside him, a tightening in his chest, a dull ache at the base of his skull. I know, he murmured. They think you have something they need. He nodded once. I do. Her eyes narrowed. You're going to give it to them? No, his voice was firm. But they won't stop until they get it. Mara leaned forward slightly. Then we need to leave, tonight. Elias studied her face, searching for any sign of deception. But there was none. Only urgency. You came back for me, he said slowly. Yes. Why now? She hesitated just for a breath. Then, because I saw what's coming. And I couldn't let it happen alone. A chill ran through him. Not from fear, but from the weight of everything unsaid. He reached out, touching the edge of her satchel. What's in here? He asked. She didn't flinch. Answers. Elias lifted the flap and peeked inside. There were documents, maps, a few old photographs, and tucked beneath them all a small black box. He recognized it instantly. His fingers hovered over it, hesitant. Mara watched him carefully. You can't keep running from this, Elias. He looked up at her. I wasn't running. You were hiding. There was truth in her words, and he hated that. Instead of responding, he pulled the box free and set it on the table between them. The metal was cool to the touch, its surface etched with symbols that pulsed faintly under the dim light. Mara's breath caught slightly. You kept it. I never stopped carrying it, he admitted. Her fingers brushed against the lid, but she didn't open it. Not yet. You know what happens if they take it, she whispered. Elias nodded. I do. And if you use it? He hesitated. That depends on what you mean by use. She gave him a sharp look. Don't play games with me, Elias. He sighed. If I use it fully, I lose myself. If I don't, they win. Mara's jaw tightened. Then we make sure they never get close enough. Elias leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. We don't even know who they are anymore. We do, she corrected. We just stopped believing in the truth. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the weariness in her eyes, the same kind that lived in his own reflection. You should have stayed gone, he said. I tried, she admitted. But you called me back. Elias frowned. I didn't call anyone. She smiled faintly. You did. Every night in your dreams. He stiffened. She reached across the table, placing her hand over his. You forget, Elias, we were never separate. Not truly. He stared at their joined hands, the weight of years pressing down on him. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Inside, the past had returned. And somewhere beyond the city, in the dark places where secrets thrived, something ancient stirred. The clock above the mantel ticked loudly, each second stretching like a thread pulled taut. Elias and Mara sat in silence. The only sound, the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant rumble of thunder rolling in from the east. Mara broke the quiet first. "You remember the last time we talked about this?" she asked, her voice low. Elias didn't answer right away. He traced the rim of his coffee cup with his thumb, staring into the dark liquid as if the answers lay beneath its surface. "Yeah," he said finally. "I remember." She leaned forward slightly, her elbows resting on the table. "Tell me." He exhaled sharply. "Why, you were there. I want to hear it from you." He glanced at her, searching for something. Reassurance, perhaps, or permission to speak the words aloud. Whatever he found in her expression made him nod. "It started with the letter," he began. "Or maybe it was the phone call. I don't know. I woke up that morning with a sense of dread I couldn't shake. And you were already standing by the window watching the sky." Mara's fingers twitched slightly, but she remained silent. "I told you what I felt," he continued. "Like something was wrong. Like someone was watching us. And then the name came up again." She swallowed. "Simon Voss." Elias nodded. "Yes, that bastard." Mara leaned back slightly. "And then? We went to the archive. You insisted we needed more information before we acted." Elias's voice grew quieter. "We found the box buried beneath layers of forgotten files. It was sealed with legal documents, court records, police reports. But the moment I touched it, I knew it belonged to us." "Together," Mara added. "Together," he agreed. "We opened it." A shiver passed through both of them at the memory. "The moment the lid lifted, the room changed," Elias said. The air became heavier. The walls pulsed like a heartbeat. "And then—" He paused, his throat tightening. "The photos," Mara finished. Elias nodded. "Dozens of them, stacked in neat piles. Some familiar, some foreign. They weren't trying to hurt us, but they wanted something. Understanding," she murmured. "They wanted justice," he corrected. "They wanted the truth to come out." Mara pressed her palms flat against the table. "And we listened." Elias looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Yes, we listened. And we learned." A long silence followed. Finally, she asked, "What did they show us?" He hesitated. She met his gaze. "Tell me." He exhaled slowly. "They showed us what would come if we didn't act. What would happen if we failed." She leaned back, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. "And we chose to bury it." Elias shook his head. "No, we chose to wait." "For what?" "For the right moment." Mara scoffed. "And now you think this is it?" "I know this is it." She studied him for a long moment. Then, without another word, she reached for the box. Elias tensed. "Are you sure?" She shot him a look. "You know I am." With careful hands, she lifted the lid. The room changed instantly. Not in some supernatural way, but in the way reality shifts when you see something you wish you hadn't. From within the box, a stack of papers spilled onto the table. Police reports, newspaper clippings, internal memos, and one single photograph. A man standing in front of a building. Smiling, Mara inhaled sharply. "It remembers us." Elias didn't respond. His focus was drawn to the center of the box, where a single object rested, a flash drive labeled only with initials. He reached for it, but Mara stopped him. "Not yet," she warned. He frowned. "Then what are we waiting for?" She didn't answer. Instead, she picked up one of the documents and read it aloud. "Case number 4782. Witness protection disbursement. Subject, Simon Voss. Status active. Location unknown." Elias clenched his teeth. "Still hiding." Mara flipped through more pages. "He's not just hiding. He's being protected." Elias's stomach twisted. "By who?" She looked up at him. "The same people who paid us to stay quiet." He stared at her. "You mean—" "The ones we trusted most." The silence that followed was thick with realization. Mara placed the documents back into the box and closed the lid. "We have to go." Elias nodded. "Now?" "Now." She grabbed the box and slipped it into her satchel, securing the strap across her body. "Where are we headed?" "To the only place they won't find us." She arched an eyebrow. "You mean—" "The Hollow." Her expression darkened. You said we'd never go back there. I lied. She hesitated only a second before nodding. Then let's move. Elias grabbed his coat from the hook by the door and pulled it on. As he did, he glanced at the photograph framed on the shelf, a younger version of them, smiling beneath the summer sun, unaware of what lay ahead. He reached for it, slipping it into his pocket. Mara noticed. Sentimental? He shrugged. Maybe. She smirked. You haven't changed much. He held the door open for her. Neither have you. As they stepped into the hallway, the air outside felt heavier, charged, as if something was watching them. Elias glanced at Mara. They know we're moving. She nodded. Let them come. He locked the door behind them and followed her down the corridor, disappearing into the night. Somewhere far away the wind howled, and in the depths of the earth something ancient stirred awake. The city streets were slick with rain, the reflections of neon signs twisting and bending, in the puddles beneath their feet. Elias and Mara moved quickly through the alleyways, avoiding the main roads where surveillance cameras and patrols might spot them. They had no illusions. They were already watching. Mara glanced over her shoulder as they turned a corner, her breath visible in the cold air. We should have taken the subway, she muttered. Elias shook his head. Too many eyes underground. We'd be trapped. She didn't argue. He was right. The subway system had been compromised years ago, long before either of them had disappeared from public records. Now every station was monitored by unseen forces, some human, some not. They reached a narrow passage between two buildings, barely wide enough for one person to pass at a time. Elias went first, pressing his back against the damp, brick wall as he scanned ahead. Nothing. Just shadows and the distant hum of traffic. Clear, he whispered. Mara followed, keeping close behind him as they emerged onto a quieter street lined with shuttered shops and rusting fire escapes. A single street lamp flickered above them, casting uneven light across the pavement. This way, Elias said, veering toward an old bookstore wedged between a pawn shop and a boarded-up cafe. Mara hesitated. You sure? He nodded. It's the only way to the tunnels without being seen. She exhaled sharply but followed him inside. The bell above the door jingled softly as they stepped into the dimly lit shop. Dust hung thick in the air, disturbed only by the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. Shelves stretched toward the ceiling, filled with books that hadn't been touched in years. A counter sat near the back, its surface cluttered with loose papers and a broken typewriter. No sign of the owner. Elias moved past the shelves, weaving through the maze until he reached a section marked, out of print. He pressed his palm against the bottom shelf, and after a brief pause, a soft click echoed through the room. A panel slid open behind the bookcase, revealing a narrow stairwell descending into darkness. Mara arched an eyebrow. Still got secrets here, huh? Elias smirked slightly. Old habits die hard. She stepped forward, peering down the stairs. Any traps I should know about? Just the usual, he replied. Falling spikes, hidden blades, a few minor curses. She shot him a look. Not funny. He chuckled under his breath and descended first, moving carefully down the stone steps. The air grew colder with each step, the scent of damp earth replacing the musty smell of old paper. At the bottom, the passage opened into a tunnel lined with exposed pipes and flickering lights embedded in the ceiling. Mara joined him moments later, pulling the panel shut behind her. How far does this go? All the way to the outskirts, Elias answered. Used to be part of the original city infrastructure before everything. Shifted underground. She walked beside him, her boots echoing against the stone floor. I thought these tunnels were sealed off after the collapse. They were, he said grimly. But some things never stay buried. As if on cue, a low rumble vibrated through the walls, making the lights flicker violently before steadying again. Mara stiffened. That wasn't just the wind. Elias placed a hand on the wall, feeling the faint pulse beneath his fingertips. Something stirring below. She frowned. You think it knows we're here? I think it's been waiting. They continued forward, the tunnel narrowing slightly as they approached a rusted metal gate, covered in faded symbols. Elias ran his fingers over them, whispering a phrase in a language that made the air crackle with energy. The gate groaned and swung inward. Beyond it, the tunnel split into two paths, one leading deeper underground, the other curving upward toward the surface. Mara pointed toward the upper path. That one takes us closer to the hollow. Elias nodded. But it's more exposed. If they're tracking us, they'll expect us to take the high route. She considered this. Then we go low. He gave her a small smile. Always knew you were smarter than me. She nudged him playfully. Don't let it get to your head. They took the lower path, descending further into the depths of the city. The temperature dropped significantly, and soon, frost began forming along the edges of the tunnel walls. After several minutes of walking, they reached another junction, one that led to a sealed vault door marked with warnings in multiple languages. Danger, unstable energy source. Authorized personnel only. Violators will be detained. Mara studied the markings. This place wasn't on any of the old maps. It shouldn't be, Elias murmured. It was erased. She turned to him. By who? He hesitated. By us. Before she could ask what he meant, the door shuddered, releasing a burst of steam from the cracks in its frame. A deep mechanical hum resonated from within, growing louder with each passing second. Mara stepped back. What the hell is that? Elias pressed his ear against the door, listening intently. Then, without warning, he grabbed her wrist and pulled her away from the vault. We need to move, he said urgently. Why? She demanded. He met her gaze, his expression unreadable. Because whatever's inside just woke up. A deafening clang echoed through the tunnel as the locking mechanism disengaged with a hiss. The vault door cracked open, spilling a wave of blinding white light into the corridor. Mara shielded her eyes, squinting through the brightness. Shadows moved within the glow, figures, indistinct and shifting like smoke caught in a current. Elias tightened his grip on her arm. Run. They sprinted down the tunnel. The sound of footsteps, too many to count, pounding behind them. The light from the vault spread outward, illuminating the walls in jagged patterns that danced like flames. Mara risked a glance over her shoulder. The figures were gaining. One of them broke free from the group, its form solidifying into something humanoid, but wrong. Its limbs were too long, its joints bent at unnatural angles. Its face, if it could be called that, was a void, featureless except for two glowing points where eyes should have been. It lunged. Elias yanked Mara aside just as the creature slammed into the wall beside them, sending chunks of concrete flying. He shoved her ahead. Keep going. She stumbled but recovered quickly, pushing herself harder. The tunnel curved sharply to the left, and as they rounded the bend, the light from the vault dimmed slightly. Behind them, the creature screamed, a sound that scraped against the inside of Mara's skull. They reached another intersection, this one marked by a crumbling staircase leading upward. Elias skidded to a halt. This way! Mara followed without question, climbing the steps two at a time. The air became warmer as they ascended, and soon, they burst through a hatch into a darkened warehouse filled with abandoned machinery and rusted containers. Elias slammed the hatch shut behind them and locked it with a heavy chain. For a moment they stood there, panting. Then Mara turned to him. What the hell was that thing? Elias wiped sweat from his brow. A remnant. She narrowed her eyes. Of what? He looked away. Of the last time we tried to stop this. Her stomach twisted. You mean, we created them? Not intentionally, he admitted. But yes, they're what happens when the boundary breaks. She stared at him. And how do we kill them? He hesitated. We don't, we contain them. She swallowed hard. Contain? Elias, they nearly tore us apart. His jaw tightened. Then we better hope we reach the hollow before they find us again. She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her damp hair. Fine, but we're having that conversation once we get there. He nodded, agreed. She picked up her satchel, adjusting the strap. Where now? He gestured toward the far end of the warehouse. There's an exit through the loading dock. From there, we'll have to cross the bridge. She frowned. The one that collapsed during the blackout? The very same. She sighed. You always did love impossible odds. He smirked. Only when you're around. She rolled her eyes but followed him toward the exit. Outside, the rain had intensified, turning the streets into rivers of reflected light and shadow. As they stepped into the storm, the echoes of the creature's scream still lingered in the distance, and somewhere deep beneath the city the vault remained open. The storm had turned the streets into rivers of black glass. Rain pounded against rooftops and windows with relentless force, drowning out all but the most insistent sounds. Lightning cracked across the sky in jagged bursts, illuminating the city in brief, ghostly flashes. Elias and Mara moved quickly through the downpour, their boots splashing through puddles as they approached the skeletal remains of the collapsed bridge. Once a major artery for downtown traffic, the structure now hung half-finished, its steel bones twisted from the force of the blackout years ago. Sections of it had caved inward, leaving only a narrow path of broken concrete and rusted rebar that stretched precariously over the river below. Mara hesitated at the edge, her breath visible in the cold air. "You're joking." Elias shook his head. "It's the only way across without running into surveillance zones." She exhaled sharply. "Of course it is." He stepped onto the bridge first, testing the ground beneath his feet. The surface groaned under his weight but held. He motioned for her to follow. She did cautiously, keeping close to the center where the structure seemed strongest. The wind howled around them, carrying rain sideways like needles slicing through fabric. Halfway across, the bridge shuddered. Mara froze. "Did you feel that?" Elias nodded slowly, eyes scanning the darkness ahead. "We're not alone." A low scraping sound echoed from beneath them, metal grinding against stone. Something was moving in the depths below. Then came the whisper. Not loud, not immediate, but unmistakable. "They sent you." Mara stiffened. "That voice." Elias grabbed her wrist. "Keep moving." They pushed forward, each step slower than the last. The wind shifted, revealing something in the mist below, a shape shifting in the water, just beneath the surface. No reflection, just movement. And then, a figure emerged, tall, thin, drenched. Its face was obscured by shadow, but its posture was unmistakably human, or once had been. Mara swallowed hard. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." Elias didn't answer. His grip on her wrist tightened. The figure tilted its head slightly as if studying them. Then it spoke again, voice layered with distortion. "You should not have come back." Mara took an instinctive step back, nearly losing her footing on the slick surface. Elias yanked Mara aside just as the creature slammed into the wall beside them, sending chunks of concrete flying. He shoved her ahead. "Keep going!" She stumbled but recovered quickly, pushing herself harder. The tunnel curved sharply to the left, and as they rounded the bend, the light from the vault dimmed slightly. Behind them, the creature screamed, a sound that scraped against the inside of Mara's skull. They reached another intersection, this one marked by a crumbling staircase leading upward. Elias skidded to a halt. "This way!" Mara followed without question, climbing the steps two at a time. The air became warmer as they ascended, and soon, they burst through a hatch into a darkened warehouse filled with abandoned machinery and rusted containers. Elias slammed the hatch shut behind them and locked it with a heavy chain. For a moment they stood there, panting. Then Mara turned to him. "What the hell was that thing?" Elias wiped sweat from his brow. "A remnant." She narrowed her eyes. "Of what?" He looked away. "Of the last time we tried to stop this." Her stomach twisted. "You mean, we created them?" "Not intentionally," he admitted. "But yes, they're what happens when the boundary breaks." She stared at him. "And how do we kill them?" He hesitated. "We don't, we contain them." She swallowed hard. "Contain?" "Elias, they nearly tore us apart." His jaw tightened. "Then we better hope we reach the hollow before they find us again." She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her damp hair. "Fine, but we're having that conversation once we get there." He nodded, agreed. She picked up her satchel, adjusting the strap. "Where now?" He gestured toward the far end of the warehouse. "There's an exit through the loading dock. From there we'll have to cross the bridge." She frowned. "The one that collapsed during the blackout?" "The very same." She sighed. "You always did love impossible odds." He smirked. "Only when you're around." She rolled her eyes but followed him toward the exit. Outside, the rain had intensified, turning the streets into rivers of reflected light and shadow. As they stepped into the storm, the echoes of the creature's scream still lingered in the distance, and somewhere deep beneath the city the vault remained open. They reached the outskirts just before dawn. The hollow lay beyond the abandoned industrial district, hidden beneath layers of forgotten infrastructure and buried memories. Few knew of its existence, and even fewer had ever entered and lived to tell about it. Mara pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders as they approached the entrance. An unassuming manhole set between two crumbling buildings, marked only by a faded symbol etched into the metal, Elias knelt beside it, brushing away years of grime. The symbol glowed faintly beneath his fingers. Guardian seal, what he murmured. Mara frowned. I thought you said no one else knew about this place. They shouldn't, he replied, frowning. Unless someone found it after we left. She glanced around warily. Do we still go in? He met her gaze. We don't have a choice. With a deep breath, he pressed his palm against the seal. The symbol flared brightly, then dimmed. A soft click echoed beneath them. The manhole cover lifted slightly, releasing a wave of cool, stale air. Elias pried it open fully and peered into the darkness below. A rusted ladder extended downward into the void. He turned to Mara. After you. She descended first, gripping the rungs tightly as she disappeared into the shadows. Elias followed, pulling the cover shut behind him. The descent was slow, the air growing colder with each passing second. After several minutes, they landed on solid ground and underground. Chamber lined with stone walls and flickering torches embedded in sconces. Mara blinked, adjusting to the dim light. This place, it hasn't changed. Elias exhaled. It never does. They moved forward, stepping onto a circular platform, engraved with intricate symbols that pulsed faintly beneath their feet. At the center stood a pedestal, upon which rested a single object, a crystal sphere suspended in midair, rotating slowly. Mara's breath caught. Is that? Elias nodded. The anchor. She stepped closer, staring into the swirling depths of the sphere. Images flickered within, memories, warnings, glimpses of futures yet to unfold. She reached out instinctively. Elias caught her wrist before she could touch it. Don't. She looked at him. Why not? Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. She narrowed her eyes. Then show me. He hesitated for only a second before placing his hand over hers, guiding it toward the sphere. The moment their fingers brushed the surface, the chamber erupted in light. The world around them blurred. And then, darkness and voices, thousands of them, whispering, crying, calling. Remember. Forgive. Choose. Mara gasped as visions flooded her mind. Scenes of fire, betrayal, sacrifice. A city burning. A man standing atop a tower, arms raised. A child reaching out from the rubble. And then, him, the one who had left them behind. Standing in the distance, watching, waiting. As suddenly as it began, the vision shattered. Mara stumbled backward, her breathing ragged. Elias caught her before she fell. She looked up at him, eyes wide. That wasn't just a memory. No, he admitted. It was a warning. She swallowed hard. He's coming. He nodded, and when he arrives, everything changes. She clenched her fists. Then we make sure we're ready. He studied her for a long moment. Even if it means facing what we tried to forget? She met his gaze without hesitation, especially then. He exhaled slowly. Then let's begin. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, the past stirred, and somewhere far below, the boundary between worlds trembled. Part 6, 4,000 words. The hollow was never silent. Even in the deepest chambers, beneath layers of forgotten history and rusted steel, there was always a sound, a low hum, like distant voices caught in an echo chamber. It wasn't mechanical nor entirely human. It was something else, something waiting. Elias and Mara moved carefully through the underground corridors, their footsteps muffled by dust and time. The air was thick with the scent of damp, stone and old paper, like a library left to rot. Every few meters, flickering sconces cast elongated shadows on the walls, making it seem as if the place itself was breathing. Mara glanced at Elias. You sure we're alone? He didn't answer right away. He pressed his palm against the wall, feeling for the pulse he knew would be there. It's still watching, he murmured. She exhaled sharply. Then let's not give it time to think. They reached a heavy iron door, covered in faded warnings and symbols that had long since lost their meaning. Elias ran his fingers over the metal, searching for the release mechanism. A soft click echoed through the corridor. The door groaned open. Inside was a vast archive, an underground vault lined with shelves that stretched toward the ceiling. Stacks of documents, photographs, and files filled every available space. Some were neatly labeled, others scattered like forgotten memories. Mara stepped inside first, scanning the room. This is where you kept everything? Elias nodded. Everything we couldn't destroy. Everything we weren't ready to face. She moved toward one of the central tables, where a stack of folders sat untouched. She opened the top one and scanned the contents. Her breath caught. Photos, documents, names she recognized. She looked up at him. You kept the files on all of them. Elias crossed the room, standing beside her. We had no choice. If we destroyed them, they'd just rewrite the truth. This way, we had proof. She flipped through more pages. And now what? We leak it all? His jaw tightened. That's what they expect. That's why we can't do it. She frowned. Then what can we do? He walked past her, toward a locked cabinet at the far end of the room. He pulled out a key from his coat pocket and inserted it into the lock. With a sharp turn, the cabinet clicked open. Inside was a single black box. Not the same one from before, but another. Mara stared at it. What's that? Elias lifted it carefully, holding it like it might shatter in his hands. This is the last piece. She narrowed her eyes. Of what? He met her gaze. Of everything. Silence stretched between them. Finally, she asked, what happens when we open it? He hesitated. We remember. She swallowed hard. I'm not sure I want to. He looked at her then, not just at her face, but into her, as if trying to see whether she was ready. You already are, he said quietly. You just don't know it yet. She took a step back. Tell me the truth, Elias. What did we do back then? He exhaled slowly. We made a deal. Her stomach twisted. With who? The only people who could protect us. She shook her head. No, that doesn't make sense. You told me we buried the truth. We did, he admitted. But not alone. She stared at him. Who helped us? He looked down at the box in his hands. The ones we thought were our enemies. She backed away. You're saying we worked with them? We had no choice, he said. If we hadn't, we wouldn't have survived. She ran a hand through her hair, pacing. So all this time, we've been running from people we trusted? Not all of them, he said. Just the ones who wanted control. She stopped pacing. And now? He turned the box over in his hands. Now we decide whether we finish what we started or let them win. She studied him. You already made your choice, didn't you? He nodded once. I just needed you to come back before I acted. She tilted her head slightly. Why me? He gave her a small, sad smile. Because you were the only one who could stop me if I ever went too far. She let out a breathless laugh. You really think I could stop you? I know you could, he said. That's why I waited. For the first time in years, she felt something shift between them, not tension, not fear, but understanding. She stepped forward and placed her hand over his. Then let's finish this together. He nodded. Together they opened the box. Inside was a single folder, sealed with red tape and stamped with a name neither of them had spoken aloud in years. Mara's breath caught. No, she whispered. Elias stared at the name on the document. Seaman Voss. But below it in smaller print was something worse. Status active. Location inbound. Mara's heart pounded. He's coming back. Elias closed the folder slowly. Yes. She looked at him. Then we need to move, now. He didn't argue. He simply slipped the folder into his coat and led her out of the archive. As they passed through the corridor, the hum in the walls grew louder. Something had changed. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, the past stirred. And somewhere far below, the boundary between truth and lies trembled. The rain had stopped by the time they reached the edge of the hollow. A heavy mist clung to the ground, curling around their boots like smoke from an unseen fire. The sky above was pale with the first hints of dawn, but it offered no warmth, only a cold, gray light that made everything feel suspended in time. Elias and Mara moved quickly through the ruins of the old industrial district, keeping to the shadows as they approached the outer perimeter. This way, Elias said, veering toward a rusted chain-link fence barely standing under years of neglect. Mara followed without question, slipping through the gap he held open for her. On the other side, the city began again, slowly at first, then with the familiar hum of distant traffic and the flicker of early morning lights. They were close now, close to where they needed to be, but also closer to being seen. She glanced at him. We should have taken a different route. He kept moving. We don't have time for detours. She frowned. You're not telling me something. He finally looked at her. I'm telling you what I can. She exhaled sharply but didn't press further. Not yet. They walked in silence for several blocks until they reached a narrow alley wedged between two shuttered storefronts. Elias stopped near a graffiti-covered dumpster and rapped twice on the metal wall beside it. A moment later, a soft click echoed from within the building. Then a door opened just enough for a pair of wary eyes to peer out. "Is it really you?" a voice asked. Elias gave a small nod. "It's me." The door opened wider, revealing a man in his late 40s, dressed in faded jeans and a worn leather jacket. His face was lined with age and caution, but recognition sparked in his expression. "Damn," the man muttered. "I thought you were dead." Elias stepped inside. Close enough. Mara followed, scanning the dimly lit interior. It was a makeshift safe house cluttered with maps, old electronics, and stacks of paper filled with handwritten notes. A single desk sat in the center, covered in photographs pinned to the wall behind it. Most of them showed one man, Simon Voss. Mara felt her stomach tighten. "You've been tracking him too." The man turned to her, surprised. "You know who this is?" She crossed her arms. "Better than anyone." He studied her for a long second before offering his hand. "Name's Callum. Used to work with your partner here." She shook it briefly. "Mara." Callum nodded. "Figured. You were never far from his thoughts." Elias ignored the comment and gestured toward the board. "Tell me what you've got." Callum moved to the wall, tapping a photo of Simon entering a high-rise building downtown. "He came back 3 days ago, quietly. No media. No records. Just a private jet landing at midnight, a black SUV waiting." Mara leaned in. "Any idea why?" Callum hesitated. "That's the part that doesn't make sense. He's not hiding. He's announcing himself." Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" Callum tapped another photo, one of Simon, shaking hands with a well-known corporate lawyer outside the same building. "He's meeting people. Powerful ones." Mara exchanged a look with Elias. "They think he's still useful." Callum nodded. "Looks that way." Elias ran a hand through his hair. "Damn it." Mara stepped forward. "How much do you know about what happened back then?" Callum sighed and pulled out a chair, sitting heavily. "Enough to know I shouldn't be involved, but not enough to walk away." Elias took a seat across from him. "Then tell us what you've learned." Callum exhaled slowly. Simon Voss wasn't just some rogue operative. He was the center of a network, a quiet, invisible system built over decades. He knew how to manipulate power without ever showing his face. Mara folded her arms. "And now he's showing it." Callum nodded. "Which means he wants something." Elias stood abruptly. "Then we need to find out what." Callum gave him a sharp look. "You planning on confronting him?" Elias didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Mara. She met his gaze, reading the unspoken question in his eyes. Finally, she said yes. Callum whistled low. "You two are either brave or insane." Mara smirked slightly. "Maybe both." Callum stood. "Then you'll need help." Elias studied him. "You'd risk it?" Callum shrugged. "I spent years trying to forget what I saw. Now that he's back, I don't think I get the luxury of forgetting anymore." Elias nodded once. "Then let's move." They left the safe house 20 minutes later, armed with new intel and a rough plan. Their target, the high-rise where Simon had been spotted. It housed multiple corporate offices, but Elias knew better. It was a front. One of many. As they drove through the city, Mara stared out the window, lost in thought. "You're quiet," Elias said after a while. She glanced at him. "Just thinking." He waited. She sighed. "Do you remember the night it all started?" He nodded slowly. She hesitated. He nodded slowly. "Like it was yesterday." She hesitated. "Did you ever believe we could stop him?" He glanced at her. "Not in the beginning. But somewhere along the way, I started to believe we could at least make him pay." She swallowed hard. "And now?" He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "Now I think we might be the only ones left who still want him to." She fell silent again, staring at the passing buildings. Outside, the city woke up. Inside, the past caught up. And somewhere far below, the truth stirred. The high-rise loomed ahead like a monolith of glass and steel. It stood taller than the surrounding buildings, casting long shadows across the street even in the early morning light. There was no sign above the entrance. No company name etched into the marble facade, just a sleek, Unmarked door and a silent security camera that tracked every movement. Elias parked the car 2 blocks away, engine off, hands still gripping the wheel. Mara turned to him. "You're thinking about walking in there alone, aren't you?" He didn't answer right away. She exhaled sharply. "Elias." Finally, he looked at her. "It's safer if I do this solo." "Safer for who?" She shot back. "You think I'm going to wait in the car while you walk straight into his trap?" His jaw tightened. "I don't know what we'll find in there." "If it's a setup—" "It is a setup," she interrupted. "That's the point." He studied her for a long moment. Then, with a slow nod, he said, "All right, but we do this my way." She smirked. "Of course." They stepped out into the cold air, adjusting their coats as they approached the building from different angles. Callum waited nearby in another vehicle, ready to act if things went sideways. Inside, the lobby was pristine, too clean, too quiet. A receptionist sat behind a curved desk, typing something on a sleek keyboard. Her eyes flicked up briefly before returning to her screen. Elias approached the elevator bank without hesitation. Mara followed close behind. A man in a dark suit stepped forward before Elias could press the call button. "Can I help you?" the man asked, voice polite but firm. Elias met his gaze. "We have an appointment." The man's expression didn't change. "With whom?" Elias smiled slightly. "Simon Voss." The man's eyes narrowed for just a second. Then he nodded toward the elevators. "Go ahead." Mara raised an eyebrow as they stepped inside. That was easy. Elias pressed the button for the top floor. Too easy. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime. As they ascended, Mara glanced at him. "You think he's expecting us?" "I know he is." She frowned. "Then why come?" He looked at her then, not just at her face, but into her. "Because sometimes the only way to win is to make them play your game instead of theirs." She considered that. "And what game are we playing?" He gave her a small, grim smile. "Chess with real pieces." The elevator dinged softly as it reached the top floor. The doors slid open to reveal a vast, minimalist office space bathed in natural light from floor-to-ceiling windows. The city stretched out around them in all directions, the skyline sharp against the pale sky. At the center of the room, standing near a long conference table, was Simon Voss. He looked older now, his hair silver at the temples, lines carved into his face from years of calculated decisions, but otherwise unchanged. He wore a tailored suit, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. He turned as they entered. "Well," he said, voice smooth as ever, "it's been a long time." Elias took a step forward. "Not long enough." Simon chuckled softly. "Still holding a grudge?" "I expected more from you." Mara stepped beside Elias, arms crossed. "Cut the crap, Simon. We're not here for pleasantries." He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Mara, of course. I wondered when you'd come back." Her stomach twisted. "You knew?" He smiled faintly. "I always did." Elias clenched his fists. "Well, why now?" "Why return?" Simon walked slowly toward them, hands in his pockets. "Because the world has changed. And people like me, we adapt." Mara narrowed her eyes. "Or we disappear." He stopped a few feet away. "Some do. Others learn when to reappear." Elias took another step forward. "You were supposed to be gone for good." Simon sighed. "So were you." Silence stretched between them. Then finally, Simon gestured toward the chairs around the conference table. "Sit, let's talk." Neither of them moved. Simon shrugged. "Suit yourselves." He walked past them toward the window. For a moment, he simply stared out at the city below. Then, without turning, he said, "You think you've uncovered everything, don't you?" Elias didn't answer. Simon continued, "You found the files. You opened the box. You pieced together parts of the truth." He turned back to them. "But you still don't understand the whole picture." Mara's fingers curled into a fist. "Try us." Simon smiled again, this time almost kindly. "You weren't just exposing corruption. Elias, you weren't just uncovering secrets, Mara." He stepped closer. "You were dismantling a system that kept the world from collapsing." Elias shook his head. "Don't try to justify this." Simon's expression darkened. "I'm not trying to justify anything. I'm telling you the cost of what you did." Mara felt a chill crawl up her spine. "What are you saying?" Simon looked directly at Elias. "You thought you were saving people, but you were also removing the last thing, keeping some of the Worst players in check. Elias' breath caught. You mean? Simon nodded. Yes, some of the people you exposed weren't just corrupt. They were the only ones who could control worse threats. Mara's heart pounded. You're lying. Simon gave her a sad look. No, Mara, I wish I was. Elias swallowed hard. You expect us to believe you were the lesser evil? Simon exhaled. I expect you to understand that the world isn't black and white, and that sometimes people like me exist so that monsters stay hidden. Mara's voice was low. You are the monster. Simon didn't deny it. He just looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, maybe I am. He turned back toward the window. But I'm also the only one who can stop what's coming next. Elias stepped forward. What do you mean? Simon didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. There's something bigger moving beneath the surface. Something neither of us can control. He looked at Elias again. And if we don't work together, it won't matter who wins or loses. Because no one will survive. Silence filled the room. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, the weight of history settled over them. And somewhere far below, the truth stirred. The silence in the room was thick, like a held breath before a scream. Simon Voss stood by the window, his back to them, hands still in his pockets. The city stretched out behind him like a living map, pulsing with movement and unaware of the storm brewing at its peak. Elias didn't move. Neither did Mara. Their minds raced through everything Simon had just said, that they hadn't just exposed corruption, but had destabilized an entire system built on secrecy, control, and quiet threats. That some of the people they'd brought down weren't just criminals, but gatekeepers keeping something worse locked away. Mara finally broke the silence. You expect us to believe that? Her voice was low, sharp, laced with disbelief. Simon turned slowly, his expression unreadable. I don't expect you to believe anything I say. He walked back toward them, stopping just short of arm's reach. I'm telling you what I know, he continued. And I'm offering you a chance to see it for yourselves. Elias narrowed his eyes. And why would you do that? Simon gave a small, bitter smile. Because if I don't, none of us make it out alive. Mara scoffed. You always were good with dramatics. His smile faded. This isn't drama, Mara, this is real. And it's already happening. Elias exchanged a glance with her. He saw the same wariness in her eyes that he felt in his gut. But there was also curiosity. A need to know the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. Show us, Elias said. Simon studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. Come with me. They followed him across the office to a side door marked, Authorized Personnel Only. He placed his palm against a biometric scanner embedded in the wall. A soft chime sounded, and the lock disengaged with a quiet click. Inside was a narrow staircase descending into darkness. No lights, no signs, just cold steel steps leading downward. Elias hesitated for only a second before stepping inside. Mara followed close behind, her senses sharp, muscles coiled like a spring. Simon closed the door behind them, plunging them into near-total darkness. A faint glow flickered to life from strips along the stairwell walls, illuminating their descent. They walked in silence for several minutes, the only sound their footsteps echoing off the metal. Finally, they reached the bottom, an underground corridor, lined with reinforced doors and security checkpoints, unlike the sleek elegance of the upper floors. This place felt militarized, cold, functional. Mara glanced at Elias. You ever hear about this place? He shook his head. No. Simon led them past multiple sealed rooms until they reached one marked, with a simple label, Level 7. He swiped a keycard and entered a code into the keypad beside the door. With a hiss, the lock released. Inside was a large chamber filled with monitors, servers, and rows of data terminals. At the center stood a circular table surrounded by chairs, all facing a massive screen on the far wall. Simon gestured toward the seats. Sit. Elias and Mara took positions across from him. Simon tapped a few commands into the console in front of him. The main screen lit up, displaying a series of classified files, surveillance footage, and encrypted reports. This, he said, is what you never got to see. Mara leaned forward. What are we looking at? Simon pressed a button and the footage began playing. It showed grainy black and white, video of a facility buried deep beneath the earth. Men in military uniforms moved through corridors lined with reinforced steel. There were containment cells, research labs, and figures, some human, others not so much, being observed under heavy guard. This, Simon said, was our most secure operation. A joint effort between intelligence agencies, private contractors, and select government officials. Elias frowned. For what purpose? To contain what we couldn't destroy. Mara's stomach twisted. You're saying this wasn't just about power or influence? Simon met her gaze. Some of it was, but not all. He advanced the footage to another section, one showing a man strapped to a chair, surrounded by armed guards. His face was pale, his eyes wild with fear. This man, Simon said, wasn't a criminal. He was a whistleblower. He leaked information about a program designed to track and neutralize individuals who had been compromised, not by ideology, but by exposure. Elias sat up straighter. Compromised how? Simon exhaled. By seeing too much. By knowing things that shouldn't be known. Some people can't handle that kind of knowledge. It changes them. Mara's voice was barely above a whisper. Like us. Simon nodded. Exactly like you. Elias looked at the screen again. And this program? What happened to it? Simon's jaw tightened. You shut it down. There was silence. Then Elias asked, Did we stop something bad or let something worse loose? Simon didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled up another file. This one showed a series of redacted reports, labeled with timestamps, stretching back over a decade. The leaks you released, Simon said quietly, didn't just expose corruption. They dismantled the last barrier between the world and what was waiting beyond it. Mara frowned. Beyond what? Simon looked directly at her. Beyond reason. Beyond control. Elias felt a chill crawl up his spine. You mean? There are things that feed on chaos, Simon said, that thrive when order breaks down. You didn't just bring down powerful men, you opened the door to something else. Mara's fingers curled into fists. You're lying. Simon didn't flinch. Am I? Elias stared at the screen, watching the final piece of footage. Play. A grainy recording of a man standing alone in a darkened room. His mouth moved silently, lips forming words that couldn't be heard. Then suddenly his body convulsed violently. The camera cut out. Simon turned off the display. Silence filled the room. Then he said, That man was my brother. Mara swallowed hard. What happened to him? Simon's voice was flat. He knew too much. Elias leaned forward. And now what? You want us to help you rebuild this thing we destroyed? Simon shook his head. No, I want you to understand what we lost. Mara's voice was tight. So what now? Simon looked at both of them. Now we decide whether to fight what's coming or run and hope it never finds us. Elias exhaled slowly. And if we choose to fight? Simon gave a grim smile. Then we'll need more than just guns. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, the weight of history settled over them. And somewhere far below, the truth stirred. The air in the underground chamber had gone still, thick with unspoken thoughts and the weight of revelations that refused to settle. Simon Voss leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. His eyes were sharp, calculating, but Elias could see something else behind them. Now, something deeper than arrogance or control. Fear. Mara was the first to break the silence. You expect us to believe you're suddenly on our side? Her voice was low, edged with suspicion. That after everything, after what you did, you just want to help us stop this? Simon didn't flinch. I never said I was on your side. Elias narrowed his eyes. Then whose side are you on? Simon exhaled slowly as if weighing how much truth he could afford to give. Then he tapped a few keys on the console in front of him. The massive screen flickered, displaying a new set of files, this time filled with names, familiar ones. Elias' breath caught. Among the listed names were people they had once trusted. Journalists, activists, former allies. Some long gone, some presumed dead. What is this? Mara asked, her voice quieter now. Simon's jaw tightened. This is the list of those who knew too much and tried to do something about it. Elias stared at the screen. And what happened to them? Simon looked at him directly. They disappeared. Mara's stomach twisted. You mean you made them disappear? He shook his head. No, something else did. Silence stretched between them. Then Elias stood. We need to leave now. Simon didn't move. Where would you go? You think you can run from this? Elias met his gaze. I think we've stayed long enough. Simon sighed, then finally pushed himself to his feet. Fine, but understand this. Whatever you decide next will determine whether you survive what's coming. Mara stepped toward him. And what exactly is coming? Simon hesitated for only a second before answering. Something that doesn't follow rules, doesn't recognize borders. It doesn't care about politics or justice. It only feeds. Elias clenched his fists. Then we fight it. Simon gave a dry chuckle. You don't fight this. You contain it. Or you die trying. Mara turned to Elias. We should go. He nodded once, then started walking toward the exit. Simon watched them go without protest. As they reached the corridor outside, the lights flickered slightly. Just once, but it was enough. Ambo. They moved quickly through the underground passage, retracing their steps back toward the elevator shaft. Mara kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting Simon or worse to be following them. Do you believe him? She asked quietly. Elias didn't answer right away. He was listening, watching. No, he finally said. Not all of it. She frowned. Then why take anything he said seriously? He glanced at her. Because some of it rang true. She stopped walking. Elias. He turned to face her. There was something we missed. Something bigger than just exposing corruption. We always knew there were things hidden beneath the surface. But maybe we didn't realize how deep it went. She swallowed hard. You're saying you think we actually unleashed something? He rubbed his temples. I'm saying we might have removed the last thing keeping it contained. A cold shiver ran down her spine. Before she could respond, a sound echoed through the corridor behind them. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate. Elias grabbed her wrist and pulled her forward. Move. They broke into a jog, weaving through the maze of underground hallways. The walls seemed to close in around them, the air growing heavier with each step. Behind them, the footsteps grew louder. Closer. Then came the voice. Low, distorted. You shouldn't have come back. Mara's pulse spiked. Elias yanked her down a side passage, just as a shadow passed through the hallway they'd been in. It wasn't human. It moved too fast, too fluidly, like smoke given shape. Elias pressed his back against the wall, breathing hard. We need to get topside now. Mara nodded, swallowing her fear. They moved again, faster this time, navigating through maintenance tunnels and emergency stairwells until they reached the elevator bank. Elias punched the call button. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. They cut power, Mara whispered. Elias cursed under his breath and turned toward the emergency stairs. Then we climb. They took the steps two at a time, ascending floor after floor, their lungs burning with effort. The deeper they climbed, the more the building seemed to shift around them. Hallways changing direction, doors leading nowhere, stairwells looping back on themselves. It was as if the structure itself was resisting their escape. Finally, they reached the top floor. The door groaned open to reveal the same sleek office space they had entered earlier. Except now it was different. Darkened, empty, and waiting. Elias stepped inside cautiously, scanning the room. Simon's gone. Mara followed, her breath ragged. Of course he is. Elias walked toward the window, staring out at the city below. The skyline shimmered faintly in the early morning light. Then he saw it. Movement. Far below, near the entrance of the building. Figures. Too many to count. Some moving with unnatural speed. Others barely visible, blending into the shadows like living ghosts. Mara joined him at the window. What the hell? Elias's voice was grim. They found us. She turned to him. Then we run. He shook his head. No, we don't have anywhere left to go. She stared at him. So what are we supposed to do? He looked at her, steady and calm. We finish this. She swallowed hard. How? He reached into his coat and pulled out the black box. Her breath caught. You brought it up here? He nodded. It's the only way. She frowned. The only way to do what? He opened the box. Inside was a single device, an old drive, marked with symbols that pulsed faintly under the dim light. This, he said quietly, is the key. Mara's heart pounded. To what? To closing the door. She stared at him. You mean? We shut it, he said. For good. She hesitated. And if we fail? His expression didn't change. Then we won't live to regret it. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, the past closed in, and somewhere far below, the truth stirred. The air inside the high-rise office was thick, too still, too heavy, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Elias held the black box in one hand, his fingers curled tightly around the edges. The faint pulse of the device inside seemed to sync with the rhythm of his heartbeat, steady and insistent. Mara stood beside him, her eyes locked on the window where the figures below moved, like shadows against the city's glow. She turned to Elias. "What exactly are we doing?" He didn't look at her. His gaze remained fixed on the device. "Ending this." Mara swallowed hard. "And what does that mean?" "You said it yourself, we don't even know what we're fighting." "We do," he corrected quietly. "We just never wanted to admit it." She frowned. "You think Simon was telling the truth?" "I think part of him was." He finally looked at her. There was something beneath all the corruption. Something bigger than any of us. She exhaled sharply. "So now we're supposed to fix it?" "No." His voice was firm. "We're supposed to shut it out." Before she could respond, a low hum vibrated through the floor beneath them. It started softly, barely more than a tremor, but grew steadily until the lights overhead flickered and the glass windows rattled in their frames. Mara staggered slightly. What the hell was that? Elias stepped toward the center of the room, placing the open black box on the conference table. The device inside pulsed brighter now, almost glowing. "This is it," he murmured. Mara joined him, staring down at the drive. "You sure about this?" He nodded once. "I've been carrying it for years, waiting for the right moment." She hesitated. "And this is it?" He met her gaze. "It has to be." Without another word, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small laptop. He connected it to the drive, and within seconds, lines of encrypted code began scrolling across the screen. Mara leaned in. "Is that—" "The key," Elias confirmed. "Or at least part of it." She watched the data stream with growing unease. "How do you even know how to use this?" He gave her a tight smile. "Years of running. Years of hiding. I spent every second trying to understand what we had done and what it meant." Her stomach twisted. "And now that you do?" His expression darkened. "Now that I do, I wish I hadn't waited so long." Outside, the figures were getting closer. They weren't just watching anymore. They were coming. Ambo. The first impact came like a thunderclap. The elevator doors exploded inward, sending shards of metal flying across the room. Mara ducked instinctively, pulling Elias down with her as debris scattered across the floor. Smoke filled the space. From the wreckage, something emerged. Not human. Its form was shifting, unstable, as if it couldn't quite decide what shape it should take. One moment it was tall and thin, limbs stretched beyond natural limits. The next it was hunched and shadowed, barely distinguishable from the darkness behind it. Mara tightened her grip on the satchel slung over her shoulder. "Tell me you have a plan." Elias didn't answer right away. His fingers flew across the keyboard, entering final commands into the system. "I need 5 minutes," he said. She shot him a sharp look. "You expect me to hold them off for 5 minutes?" He glanced at her. "You always were better at improvisation than I was." She exhaled sharply. "Fine, but if I die doing this, I'm haunting you." He smirked briefly before focusing again on the screen. Mara turned toward the advancing figure. It stopped just short of the table, tilting its head slightly as if studying her. Then it spoke, not with a voice, but with a presence that pressed against her mind like static. "You should not have returned." Mara clenched her jaw. Too late for that. It lunged. She rolled aside just in time, narrowly avoiding the swipe of its elongated fingers. She grabbed the nearest object, a heavy paperweight, and hurled it at the creature. It passed through harmlessly. Of course. She cursed under her breath. Physical weapons wouldn't work. She needed something else. Something stronger. Her eyes darted to the device on the table. Elias was still typing furiously. She only had moments. Ambo. Downstairs, the rest of the building was waking up. Doors slammed open. Elevators groaned to life. Shadows pooled along the corridors like spilled ink, stretching unnaturally across the walls. More of them were coming. Simon Voss stood near the entrance, watching the chaos unfold with an unreadable expression. One of his men approached. "Sir, they're upstairs." Simon nodded slowly. "I know." The man hesitated. "Should we intervene?" Simon didn't move. "No." The man frowned. "But if they fail—" "They won't," Simon said simply. He turned toward the stairwell. "Not this time." Ambo. Back on the top floor, Mara was bleeding. A shallow cut ran along her forearm where the creature had grazed her, and her breaths came fast and shallow. She kept moving, dodging, weaving, staying just ahead of the thing that wasn't entirely real. It whispered again, louder this time. You opened the door. Mara gritted her teeth. Yeah, and I'm going to close it. She grabbed the satchel and yanked it open, revealing the old documents and photographs inside. She pulled one out, the photo of them standing beneath the summer sun, smiling, unaware of the storm ahead. She held it up like a shield. The creature recoiled. Just slightly. Enough. Elias shouted, now. Mara threw the photo onto the table beside the device. At once the symbols on the drive flared brightly. The room filled with light. The creature screamed. The walls shook. And then, everything changed. Ambo. The building groaned as if caught between two realities. The creature writhed, its form distorting violently as if being pulled apart by unseen forces. The light from the device expanded outward, illuminating the entire space in a blinding glow. Mara stumbled back, shielding her eyes. Elias kept his hands on the keyboard, inputting the final sequence. Then, a sound. Not loud, not violent, just final. Like the closing of a door, the creature let out one last shriek before vanishing into the light. Silence fell. The glow dimmed. The room settled. Elias exhaled shakily and looked at Mara. She stared back at him, stunned. It worked, she whispered. He nodded. It did. She looked around. Is it really gone? He hesitated. Contained. She swallowed hard. That's not the same thing. No, he admitted. But it's the best we can do. She stepped forward, gripping the edge of the table. And what happens now? He closed the laptop, then gently placed the black box back into the satchel. We disappear, he said. She arched an eyebrow. Again? He gave a small, tired smile. For good this time. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right. Outside the city stirred. Inside the past faded. And somewhere far below the boundary trembled. The city was waking up. Cars hummed through the streets. Lights flickered on in office buildings. The first rays of morning stretched across the skyline like hesitant fingers reaching into the night's remnants. But for Elias and Mara, the night had not ended. It had only changed shape. They stood at the edge of the rooftop, wind tugging at their coats as they looked out over the city that had tried to swallow them whole. Behind them, the high-rise remained eerily silent. No sirens, no alarms, no signs of pursuit. Whatever had been unleashed below had been contained, for now. Mara exhaled slowly, watching her breath curl into the air. It's quiet. Elias didn't look at her. His gaze remained fixed on the horizon. Too quiet. She frowned. You think it's not done? He finally turned to face her. I don't know. But I do know this, what we did back there wasn't a fix. It was a delay. She swallowed hard. Then what happens when the delay ends? He shook his head. We won't be here to find out. She studied him for a long moment. You mean that, don't you? He gave a small, tired smile. Yeah, I do. She walked toward the rooftop's edge, gripping the railing as she looked down at the city below. The streets were filling with life, people moving, traffic flowing, unaware of how close they had come to something they could never understand. We really are leaving, she murmured. Elias stepped beside her, for good. She glanced at him. No more running? No more looking over our shoulders? No more ghosts, he said simply. She let out a breathless laugh. That almost sounds peaceful. He nodded. It should be. She turned to fully face him. And where exactly is for good? He reached into his coat and pulled out a worn envelope. The edges were frayed, the ink faded, but the destination was still legible. Mara took it from him and read the address. A small town far beyond the reach of cities, far from networks, surveillance, and old names that carried too much weight. She looked up at him. You've had this ready for a while. He shrugged. I told you I spent years waiting for the right moment. She smiled faintly. Guess this is it. He nodded once. It is. She tucked the envelope into her coat pocket and looked back out over the city. I used to think we'd end up buried under all of this, she said quietly. That we'd die chasing shadows, trying to make sense of things that were never meant to be understood. Elias leaned against the railing beside her. And now? She exhaled slowly. Now I think we're just tired. He smirked slightly. Tired is better than dead. She nudged him playfully. Don't jinx it. They stood in silence for a while longer, listening to the distant hum of the city waking up. Then Mara asked, "Do you ever regret it?" He didn't need clarification. He knew exactly what she meant. He thought about it for a long time before answering. "Not the choices," he said finally. "Only the cost." She looked at him. "What cost?" He met her gaze. "All of it." She understood. The lives lost. The people who vanished. The truths they uncovered and buried again. The doors they opened and the ones they closed without knowing what lay beyond. She pressed her lips together. "Sometimes I wonder if we did the right thing." He tilted his head slightly. "Would it matter if we did?" She considered that. Then after a beat, she shook her head. "No, not anymore. Because in the end, they had survived. And survival, however imperfect, was its own kind of victory." Ambo. Downstairs, the building remained empty. Simon Voss had disappeared before the final confrontation, vanishing into the depths of the underground corridors, like a ghost slipping between cracks in reality. His men were gone too. Some fled, others left behind in silence. The only sign that anything had happened at all was the damage to the elevator shaft, the scorched marks along the walls, and the lingering scent of ozone and something older, something ancient, stirring beneath the surface. But above it all, the city continued forward, unaware of the battle that had taken place in the shadows. And somewhere far below, the boundary trembled. Elias and Mara left the rooftop without another word. They moved quickly through the abandoned halls, past shattered glass and broken steel, descending through maintenance tunnels until they emerged onto a side street lined with parked cars and early morning joggers. The world felt normal again. Too normal, as if nothing had happened. Mara glanced at Elias. "We'll have to change phones, identities, everything." He nodded. "Already handled." She arched an eyebrow. "Of course you have." He smirked. "Old habits." They reached the car, a nondescript sedan parked near the curb, engine already running thanks to Callum, who sat behind the wheel with a wary expression. He rolled down the window. "You two finally done playing hero?" Elias opened the passenger door. "Something like that." Mara got in beside him, settling into the seat as Callum pulled away from the curb without another word. The city blurred past them as they drove, fading into the background like a dream slipping from memory. Callum glanced at them in the rearview mirror. "So, we winning today?" Elias exhaled. "Depends who you ask." Callum grunted. "I'll take that as a maybe." Mara leaned her head back against the seat, closing her eyes for a brief second. When she opened them again, she asked, "What happens next?" Elias looked out the window. "We disappear." She gave a small, tired smile. "Again." He turned to her. "This time we stay gone." She nodded once. "Agreed." Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, the past faded, and somewhere far below, the truth stirred.